Welcome to Beyond the Build, a new series from Shopify where we share stories behind the Shopify ecosystem, a platform where founders, developers, and innovators come to build for more than 1.7 million merchants worldwide. And on the show today, we have Laura Behrens Wu, the co-founder and CEO of Shippo. Shippo is a multi-carrier shipping API and web app that enables e-commerce businesses, marketplaces, and platforms to connect to multiple shipping carriers. Today, Shippo has grown to over 150 employees, over 110,000 customers, and just recently raised $45 million in funding, valued at over $495 million. Laura, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. No, I'm excited to be here, excited to talk about our journey and the role that Shopify has played in that.
That's awesome. And it's actually a big week for you, right? Because we just saw your funding announcement on Tuesday.
That's right. No, it's very timely to be on this show this week. On Tuesday, we announced our new round of financing. We raised another $45 million, valued at $500 million now. Now I'm finally able to talk about that.
Like, what's the origin story? Where were you, Laura, personally, and what drove you to the idea?
Yeah, so it is a little bit of an unusual founding story. We didn't really sit together, like my co-founder and I, to decide to build a shipping software company. Both of us, I think back then, were maybe 23 something around that age. We came to San Francisco as part of a summer internship, both for different startups. So I joined a fintech company back then that was right out of YC, and I was their summer intern, and that was really my first time in Silicon Valley. I'd wanted to join a startup in San Francisco to do that because I've just heard about San Francisco and Silicon Valley through TechCrunch, have never really been there, have been working at various other startups in Europe beforehand, and just wanted to see the real deal. So came to San Francisco for that, was meant to stay for a summer, but I really, really enjoyed it and had no desire to go back to school after that. So decided to just stay full time. And at that point in time, I was also brainstorming with my co-founder, Simon, to see if there's anything that we could build together. We always had the ambition to do something together, but couldn't quite figure out what. And I think it was a difficult process getting started because we just didn't have any groundbreaking ideas. I remember we had a spreadsheet where we put in a bunch of different ideas, a wide variety of different ideas, and none of them were particularly compelling. So we decided that instead of just waiting for the best idea to come, we'll just get started building an e-commerce business, and that's really what we did. So we're actually using Shopify for that as well. We've built a small e-commerce store and started selling products just on the internet. And I think our first realization there was it was super easy to sell on the internet. Shopify made it very easy to look professional, even for people who've never done e-commerce before. And then we started getting a few early orders coming in, and that was the first time we were thinking about shipping. And I think it really comes to illustrate, for us, shipping was an afterthought. It was really not a high priority to figure out, but suddenly the orders came in, and we had to figure out how to get them to the customers. And it's the first time something happens in real life in the entire process of running an e-commerce business. You meet your customers on the internet, you accept payments on the internet, and then you need to ship, and then a package needs to travel across the country to reach your audience. So we walked, I think as a lot of people do, we walked to the USPS store just to hand over our package there, and came to really not enjoy that experience as much. So then started looking into the technologies, the APIs provided by FedEx, UPS, USPS, and realized that these APIs are not as intuitive to use, especially comparing them to best-in-class APIs like Twilio or Stripe, or comparing their dashboards to the user experience provided by a Shopify dashboard. So that was how this idea came about. The founder I used to work for at LendUp, he always said, build something that's a painkiller, not a vitamin. So decided realized that shipping is a major pain point for every single e-commerce business. And if we can just make it slightly easier, then we're building, or we're giving our customers a painkiller. And so that's what we did.
Can you unpack that a little bit more? I love that quote. So you said that make something that's a painkiller, not a vitamin.
Yes. And I think that one, I mean, it's not my original quote. It's really from the founder I used to work for, Zasha. And I think what he just meant to say by that is if you build something that is nice to have, it is just difficult to sell something that's nice to have. You have to convince someone that they
Right.
need it. But if you're selling something that's solving a real pain point, that's a painkiller, and your customer is in pain, and until you give them your solution, then it's a much easier sell. And I think that's the case for a lot of B2B businesses. And like I hear a lot of these stories where like founders say, in hindsight, like second time founders, like first time founders start consumer companies, second time founders start B2B companies, and
I've definitely heard that too. My startup before joining Shopify was consumer, and I would say
yes,
that to
yes.
myself.
I mean, I'm not saying that B2B businesses are easy. Like it's for sure not been easy, but it's
Right.
just nice to build something that like all e-commerce businesses need, and they're seeking out shipping solutions. They're having real pain points, and then if you can give them a solution that is solving their pain points, it's a much easier sell. Like we hardly need to go like uh, honestly, we don't need to go to anyone convincing them that they need to do shipping. Like if they're running an e-commerce business selling physical products, they just need to ship.
Totally. And the fact that you yourself were a merchant before you started the business means that you experienced the pain point firsthand. So I think that like automatically kind of just gives you more insight because you felt the pain yourself,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
That's awesome. So, okay, so you're back. So you pivot your merchant business into a shipping API. At what point are you like, we should integrate with Shopify? Was it at the very beginning? Or like what part of the journey did that
Good
come up?
question. So it was not at the very beginning. It took us a few iterations to get there. But starting from the very beginning, I think what we first had in mind was to build something like really like Stripe portfolio, but for the shipping industry. So what that meant for us was we wanted to build an API layer that connects to all different shipping providers, and that is honestly still the core of Shippo. But what happened early on was when we released our first API connecting to a bunch of different shipping providers, we like started talking to customers who could use our API, and very naturally, like customers or e-commerce merchants who know how to integrate an API, they're typically mid-sized or larger. Otherwise, like these merchants, like it's typically the larger companies that have developers in-house who can do this for them. So when we started talking to these larger companies, like shipping was already set up for them. They're already shipping through something that they've built homegrown, and they found our solution to be compelling, but they wanted to make sure that it was scalable. And they would ask questions along the lines of like, how many packages are you already shipping, and how much volume is going through your API, just to make sure that they can rely that they can rely on us. And early on, like these were hard questions to answer because the answer was like there were no packages going through our API. There was no volume going through it. And that was
Like zero.
zero, exactly. So
Yeah.
that was our experience very early on talking to customers who could potentially buy the API. So then Simon and I went back to the drawing board, and we realized, okay, what that means is we have to talk to customers who are still very small, who don't have these considerations just yet about how many packages are going through our API. And we started talking to SMBs. And that was really when the realization came that actually these SMBs, they they have a giant pain point. Shipping is even more painful for them than it is for mid-sized businesses. But they did not know what an API was. Like they were all sold on what we were trying to solve for them. But when it came to looking at our API docs, they were just very confused. And for them, we decided to build a dashboard on top of our API. And then we just met them where they were. And at the beginning, that was mostly on Shopify. So we decided to build our app for the Shopify App Store. I think that was in 2015, roughly. And our first customers, they were mostly Shopify customers. We acquired them through that integration. And fairly soon, we found good word of mouth, good product market fit with our dashboard product, with our app for Shopify merchants.
That's awesome. And so what happened at that moment? Like I remember you mentioning um, that it kind of introduced you to this world of SMB that you realized was the place that you should be focusing.
Yeah. So I think what we then realized was For a lot of our SMB merchants, like shipping is a big cost factor. They're doing this by hand still. They're like they like a lot of these merchants, they were still going like physically to the USPS store or the FedEx location, the UPS location, and anything we could do for them to save time or money would be very, very helpful. So these customers, like we started acquiring a lot of customers that were still very small, either just getting started or haven't like made their switch to shipping software just yet, still doing a lot of shipping manually. And then in that customer segment, I think that the build something that's a painkiller, not a vitamin, just really holds true, because shipping is so much harder for SMBs than for a business who's already up and running and has shipping set up. So we're able to capture them early and started getting some good product market fit, or like we got a lot of word of mouth from our customer base. And I think that's where the App Store was quite beneficial for us, because when Shopify customers use Shippo, like a lot of them were compelled to leave reviews. A lot of them still are, and then those reviews then contribute to more organic traffic, more word of mouth, and that was how like the first flywheel got going. I think in the Shopify App Store, those reviews consistently ranked us pretty high, and more customers were able to find us.
That's awesome. Yeah, and the beauty of SMB, I think too, is like then you grow alongside with them, right? Like to your point, the founders themselves are feeling the pain, and then if you kind of give them the solution that they love and that solves their problem, you're their partner in their growth story.
I think
right?
that's a really excellent point. Like there are two different points in there. First of all, you get to talk to the founders. When you're talking to SMBs, you can talk directly to the founders, and they'll able to tell you like what's going well, what's not going well. They'll able to give feedback. And I think at the beginning we really like honed, like we really told the story, which is a true story, that we're a small business as well. Like we are just getting started. We're looking for feedback. And a lot of our early customers were very vocal about giving feedback, which was phenomenal. And both my co-founder and I were talking directly to them. We're doing customer support ourselves, just being very close to our customers. And then to your other point, like a lot of the SMB businesses that started with us back then in 2015, they've become pretty sizable companies, which I think is the beauty of working with SMBs. Like you get that compounded growth. SMB customers, they do grow, and then they grow alongside of you, and you're able to just it's just an you see the results a little later, but it's much easier to acquire SMBs who then grow than to try acquire mid-sized customers where a sales cycle takes significantly longer. And I think the other part here is also as part of fundraising. I think it's just easy, or it's nice to see early traction. It's nice to bring in early traction when talking to seed investors. So with our early traction, like with those immediate sales cycles, and when I say immediate, like our product was, and the majority still is, like very much self-served, and that gives us then like good immediate traction to show investors.
So on that note, like walk me through that journey. So at what point, what was the first round that you raised, and at what point of the business were you like, we want to take outside capital?
Yeah, so the first round that we raised was I think it was 2.5 million sometime in 2015 as well. And I think for that point in time, it was a pretty sizable round. I know that round sizes have gotten more out of control recently. But yeah, I think it was not that easy to raise our first round of financings, mostly because both Simon and I were Silicon Valley outsiders. Like it was our first time in San Francisco. We didn't have a big network here. And we also didn't really know how to pitch our business. And I mean, honestly, still refining the pitch. Like every time I fundraise, I learn new things. But I think my main learnings back then were like what resonated really well with investors was the size of the opportunity. Like e-commerce is a pie that's continuously expanding. It is still growing, and I think there's just, especially now after COVID, like during COVID, consumer behaviors have shifted quite a lot, and the transition from offline to online is just accelerating. So that pie is continuously expanding. Shipping is not going to go away, and then I would say it is just the early traction that was able to show that our customers liked our solution. And then of course, like the other 2 points here are that the existing solutions that are out there, they're clunkier to use, they're difficult to use. Plus, there's an external pressure as well, which is Amazon and Amazon Prime. So these were the main components of our pitch. They're still the main components of our pitch today. And at that point in time, I had pitched at least like 125 investors to raise our first round of seed financing, and was really just happy that it was done.
Yeah, I can imagine. 2.5 million at that time was huge,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it was, pre-seed and seed rounds were like 500K,
Yeah.
like, and now that's just
Yes.
2.5 million is your earliest round.
Yes.
So it's crazy how much that changed in a short amount of time. But I remember, like, your story kind of reminds me too of when the whole point on how the market is expanding. Like Toby has shared a lot of his stories about his early experience fundraising and how a lot of people would ask, like, well, how big is the SMB
Yes.
market really? And the whole I think the point that a lot of people missed was like, if we get this right, we reduce friction to entrepreneurship and we grow the
Yes.
size of the market,
Yep.
right? So like the size of the market is growing
Yes.
alongside what we're doing because of what we're
Yes.
doing. So and to your point, like at the end of the day, commerce almost is the basics of like finding someone to sell a product
Yes.
to, having a product to sell, and then getting that product in the hands of the
Yes.
customer. And so the shipping market is only going
But
to get
I
bigger
think
as
just
well, right?
to add to that, and I couldn't agree more, but I think commerce is still in its very, very early days. And obviously, like at least for businesses like Shippo, like it's nice that the path has been paved by companies before us, Shopify being one, Stripe being one, just reducing the barrier of entry for e-commerce merchants. And but then if I think about future opportunities, it's just like right now I could buy anything I want on the internet from anywhere. Like I have a cat. My cat, I got her a sweater. It was someone selling cat sweaters in Sweden, hand knitting them. Like I can buy something from a person in Sweden, but then the question is how does that package get here? Like it's very easy to click buy from anywhere in the world. It is harder for the package to arrive here. Like some real life occurrences need to happen, and there's just still a lot of friction there. So I do think that opportunity of like making shipping, or starting with shopping and then shipping being a part of it, like making e-commerce more frictionless, there's still like the opportunity is still giant. We're still quite early there.
Right. I totally agree. And then the last year of what's happened with COVID has just accelerated it even further. So
Yeah.
it's already it's early, but then also the demand has been pulled forward.
Yeah.
So it's just like this really prime moment in time right
Agreed.
now,
And
right?
I would also say, like, I was actually quite positively surprised that, so we were bracing ourselves when COVID started. We didn't know what to, like, no one knew what to expect, obviously. But I think we were not sure how it would impact our SMB businesses. So our first step was just to make our product free for all SMBs for the entire year. And we've since extended that because we wanted to make sure that we're supporting our independent businesses. And that's, I think, has been also very motivational for the team. However, as I'm looking at the numbers now, I'm just like really happy that our SMB businesses are actually doing better than before. It seems like everyone's buying on the internet, and SMBs are getting a fair share of that as well. So all of our existing customers are expanding, new customer cohorts are expanding faster than before. And yeah, we're all businesses that are getting started, I think, are getting started as online businesses. So there's just no way around that. And it seems like there's also a new kind of consumer awareness that's been developed, where consumers want to buy from independent businesses and want to support independent stores.
100%. Like there's so much more that, like, you really are seeing communities come together to
Yes.
support local, make sure that like the small businesses in their community are
Yeah.
surviving. Yeah, it's been really incredible to see on our side as well. Um, so speaking about the future though, as you kind of brought up, like what is your view on the future of this industry, like of shipping overall, and Shippo itself? Like what does the next 5 years look like to you?
Yeah, so I'll start with the future of the industry, and then I'll get to Shippo and narrow it down for us. But I think in the shipping industry, like overall, the overall trend, at least from a merchant perspective, I think is that consumers are expecting things to arrive faster and faster. So there is that kind of it's only going into one direction, and it's mostly driven by Amazon and Amazon Prime, 2-day free shipping, 1-day free shipping, soon next like same day free shipping, and it's a question of how to make that happen from an SMB perspective as well, and how to make sure that SMBs are not always catching up and behind, but developing a new bar, a new standard for SMB shipping. And I think we're really excited to try doing that. And then from just the carriers are actually an interesting industry as well, because we've got a lot of the traditional carriers that are now adapting to SMB businesses. So I think UPS has made a strong statement that they want to focus on SMBs, and that's their highest priority for the year. And then we've seen however, we've also seen just a lot of regional carriers that are up and coming, and our customers are starting to tap into that network. So we're seeing increased fragmentation in the market. There's also a lot of just same day delivery companies and same city delivery companies meeting new kinds of demands, like same day and on demand shipping demands. And then I would also add, like I am quite excited to see what's going to happen in terms of international, because there's just such a big discrepancy between how easy it is to buy internationally and how hard it is to get your package from a foreign country to yours. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen there, and also excited to drive that. And then I think from our perspective, we're going to grow the company. We're 150 people right now, so looking to add another 150 people this year. We are going to be more remote friendly for that. And then in terms of focus, like platforms, Shopify among others as a platform partner, but platforms have really like developed to become our bread and butter, and like developed to be like a super strong customer acquisition channel. So we've been like one of our pillars this year is to focus on building more functionalities for platforms to be a stronger partner to them. And that also leads us to international expansion, because of a lot of our platforms are already international. So it makes sense for us to be international as well. And then lastly, like platforms are giving us access to the customer segment that we're best at, which is SMBs. So really just doubling down on the SMB segment, while also making sure that as our SMB customers grow, we can grow with them. So starting to build a few functionalities for larger customers.
On the international piece for a minute, I love how you said it, how like selling to international customers is different than delivering to international customers. Those are two big problems on their own.
Yes.
And one can be solved faster and easier than the other. So you're already in Germany and France, right? You were mentioning, what countries is Shippo in today, and what have you learned from your experiences so far playing in different markets?
Yeah, so we are in the US, California, Canada, US, Canada, Germany, France, UK, and Australia. And when I say expanding internationally, what that means for us is just we need to add carriers, local carriers in those international countries. The countries that I just mentioned, we have a local carrier network there already, just looking to strengthen it, add more carriers in Western Europe. And I mean, from the US, we can ship anywhere right now. And then there's a question from like, how do we enable shipping within, let's say, Spain or from Spain to anywhere in the world? Spain as one example, one random example. And I think we are also seeing actually that through platforms, we're able to acquire customers locally significantly easier than if we were to try like set up our own customer acquisition engine in those countries. So we do have a lot of customers finding us through different app stores who are already in one of these geographies, and our app store listing just says like where we're active in, and then customers can self-select to sign up.
And any insights on like customer demographics in different regions, like how different people sort of engage?
Yeah, I would say I am German myself, so I'm allowed to say that. Like the German market is a very tough one. I think Germans have a lot of skepticism around new products that they've not heard of. So when we launched Shippo, we actually launched it we wanted to launch it in Germany first, but got just a ton of it wasn't easy. And then when we added the US as our second country, like volume started or traction started coming in through our US customers much faster. So I've just loved serving the US market first and really proving out demand. I think US SMBs are very open to trying new products, especially if it can make their lives easier.
So of the countries you're not in yet, do you have can you share like where do you want to go next?
Yeah, so I think next is really like we want to double down on. We have a few carriers in the UK. Want to make UK super strong, and then mostly like that would be our first next market to move into. But then like, the goal is really to cover the a good part of Western Europe at the end, or yeah, to cover a good part of Western Europe at the end of this year, and to be the largest network of shipping providers worldwide. So I think that the power of Shippo is when you connect to the Shippo API, you should be able to get a shipping label from any shipping provider around the world with the exact same API call. So that's the vision we're going after.
What's some advice that you have for new players joining the ecosystem? So building for commerce, there's a lot of developers right now, I think, like that have built potentially other products before, but are really looking at the commerce market today. And so, what advice do you have for someone starting out?
So I would say, like I think, yeah. First of all, that e-commerce is still in its pretty early days. It's still it's not saturated just yet, and I would start looking at just anything that e-commerce merchants or SMBs are doing by hand. And they're like it is nice to build for SMBs because a lot of the mid market or like yeah a lot of the mid market products are well, kind of out of reach for SMBs, both in terms of price, but also in terms of complexity. So starting with SMBs, you can start just putting out MVPs, immediately solving their pain points. And the product does not need to be extremely polished as long as it's like helping them save time or money. So I think SMBs is a good place to start, and then looking at whatever SMB customers are doing by hand. And then I think as part of that, I would just be very like in tune with what the customers are saying. So I think it was a big plus for me and Simon to be doing customer support ourselves early on, and like we actually took those phone calls and we responded to emails ourselves, just talking to customers, looking at how they were using our product, and we for sure made a few changes. Like we started as an API only company, and then added a dashboard based on customer feedback, and then added app store connections also based on customer feedback. So there's just there's I think a lot of the success just came from listening to our customers early on.
It's funny because I think support is such an underestimated part of the secret sauce to like success in SaaS. And like I think a lot of the top players in our app ecosystem, like it's obviously hugely important to Shopify, but how closely connected can you stay to your customers, and how strong is your support for them? Because
Yeah.
it totally helps
Yeah.
drive your product and drive like the connection that folks feel.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in terms of customer support, like especially working with SMBs, they're working directly with the founders. They're the main decision makers. They're the ones writing you a customer support ticket, but they're also the ones deciding whether or not to switch or stay on your product. So it's nice to be talking to the main decision makers.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. And so just circling back at the beginning of the conversation, we talked about how you guys just closed a really big round earlier this week. What was that experience like relative to like, you just walked us through all the history and the first time that you raised money and, everything you sort of learned along the way. At this point, was it very simple? As soon as you were like, okay, I want to raise another round, like everyone gets it. Everyone knows the industry is growing and it's easy, or what was that experience?
I wish. I want to ask Toby at some point if if it was ever easy for him to raise money. So let's see. I think there were a few distinct phases in the life cycle of Shippo, and I think they're probably similar across most different companies. So it started out with like just me and my co-founder and a few other people just working on everything together and see what sticks. Then we started getting good word of mouth, organic traffic. I would probably call it like product market fit for a certain customer segment as well, which then contributed to more word of mouth. And then at some point in time, we realized that like organic traffic is great, but it's not really controllable. We don't know how to scale it up, and we need to find ways to find more predictable and scalable customer acquisition channels. And that one was something, I wish we would have done sooner. I think we're just really excited about all of that organic traffic for a long time and thought that we're doing so well. We were just focused on other things. And then we started building a marketing team, an onboarding team, a business development team to help figure out scalable customer acquisition channels. And then in all of those phases, I would say before you get product market fit, before you get scalable customer acquisition channels, at least for us, it was about making sure that we're not running out of money. Because unless we've proven a few of these things, it's just hard to keep raising money. So we then found our scalable customer acquisition channels. And for us, what really worked was driving inbound and converting inbound traffic into paying customers, and business development, of course, with platforms and marketplaces. And then when we found those, we raised a new round of financing based on that. That was end of 2019, early 2020. And then COVID started. And when COVID started, I think we're just all hands on deck, making sure that we're able to keep up with all the new signups, answering questions. Most of these people have never done e-commerce before, or we're trying to do this in a hurry. So is about supporting our new customers best. And now we just raised another round of financing because of the growth rate coming out of last year. I would say it was easier than our first few rounds of financing, but I still wouldn't call it easy. I think lots of investors, because they're not shipping themselves, they're not running e-commerce businesses, they just don't have that sort of awareness of how important a product like this is. And so I think consumer startups who are able to buy into the hype or have investors use their product, at least investors are seeing the power of it and our users themselves. For our product, I think our investor Jeremy Levine is using it sometimes to ship packages, but still he doesn't run a store. None of our investors do.
He should know Shopify pretty well, though. So
Yeah.
I'm sure that.
Yes.
I'm sure that helps.
And then let's see, and I'd say, yeah. So that's just teaching people about how important or how hard shipping is for SMBs. But at this point, I think it's there's just a good amount of traction. I think logistic tech is becoming more just front and center for people to think about. I also do think that SMBs are they're just hard for investors to understand. Investors are excited about flashy brands, and those flashy brands are typically big brands.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's so interesting because if you really look at the merchant journey, SMB or large retailer itself, every sort of moment in the journey is an entire industry of its own. And within that, there's billion-dollar markets that are just totally untapped, right? Every merchant needs customer support. Every merchant needs shipping solutions that make shipping easier. Every merchant needs different ways of finding and engaging with their customers. And so even though there's a lot of attention on commerce right now, I think there's so many of these markets that are heavily underestimated in terms of how big they are. And they won't be the big consumer brands because they're not solving consumer pain points, but they're the behind the scene brands of the merchants, right? Well, listen, Laura, thank you so much. This has been such a fun conversation. I know that everyone's probably really stoked to hear your story. So thank you so much for sharing your journey. To folks that are listening, thanks so much for tuning in, and join us next week for more founder talks on Beyond the Build.